You look at a photograph long enough, it stops being a memory. It becomes a ghost. I've got one on my mantelpiece. It's not of my wife or my kids. It's just a kid in a starched uniform, trying his damnedest to look tough for the camera. The ghost in the photo is me, I suppose. But the man looking back at it, the one with 60 years of road on his face, he doesn't really know that boy. Not anymore. What he knows is why that boy did what he did. It all started with another ghost. The year was 1968. I was 20 years old, married 3 years to my high school sweetheart, Tony Jane. Life was quiet, predictable. We'd had a rough time, lost a baby before we ever got to hold it. And that kind of grief puts a silence in a house that's hard to fill. Then a letter came. A letter from Uncle Sam. He said the U.S. Army had a spot for me. So there I was, on a bus to Columbia, South Carolina, headed for a big room full of other scared kids waiting to have their futures decided for them. A sergeant, looked like he was carved out of granite, stood up front. He didn't shout, just asked a simple question. Any of you boys want to be Marines? A few hands went up. Not many. Mine was one of them. It wasn't because I thought I was tougher than anyone else. It wasn't about the dress blues or the glory. It was about Dennis Michael, my best friend from high school, from Vacaville, California. He'd been a Marine, and in February of that year, he'd been killed in Hughes City. When that sergeant asked his question, the only thing that went through my 20-year-old brain was a cold, simple thought. I'm going to go over there and get the son of a bitch that got my friend. That was it. I wasn't signing up for my country. I was signing up to chase a ghost. Boot camp at Paris Island is designed to kill the boy you were. They strip you of your name, your hair, your identity. They break you down until you're nothing but a set of reflexes wrapped in green fabric. They teach you how to march, how to salute, how to make your bed so tight a quarter bounces off it. And they teach you how to kill. They teach you the feel of an M16 in your hands, how it becomes an extension of your body. They teach you the most efficient way to use a K-bar knife, showing you the soft spot just under the chin where a blade can end a life with terrifying ease. You go in a civilian. You come out a weapon. The first day of September, 1968. The wheels of a civilian airliner touched down at Da Nang Air Base. For a moment, it felt like any other trip. Then the doors opened and the heat hit you. Not just heat, but a thick, wet blanket of air that smelled of jet fuel, rotting vegetation, and something else. Something metallic. Fear. We hadn't been on the ground for 20 minutes before the sirens started screaming. Someone yelled, "Incoming!" and the world dissolved into chaos. We scrambled for the bunkers, a bunch of greenhorns who didn't even have our rifles yet. I dove into a sandbagged hole, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Next to me, a guy was making the sign of the cross over and over. Outside, the rockets whistled in, followed by ground-shaking explosions. I remember thinking, clear as a bell, I have to survive 13 months of this? I haven't even survived half an hour. That was my welcome to Vietnam. From there, they choppered me out to my unit, Delta Company. The old-timers had a nickname for it, Dying Delta. The helicopter skids had barely touched the mud of the LZ when the welcome got even warmer. The grunts who met us were coming back from a patrol. They looked like old men, their faces hollowed out, their eyes a million miles away. One of them, a kid who couldn't have been much older than me, had a human scalp hanging from the side of his helmet. It was just there, a grotesque trophy. That's when you know you're not in Kansas anymore. That's when you know all the rules have been burned away. The first few nights in the bush are a special kind of hell. You don't sleep. You can't. Your body is flooded with so much adrenaline that your eyes feel like they're nailed open. You lie in your fighting hole, clutching your M16, and every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, is the enemy coming to get you. And then you hear it for the first time. The sound of an AK-47. It's not like in the movies. It's a flat, ugly pop, pop, pop that seems to get inside your bones and vibrate. Anyone who says that sound doesn't put a cold knot of fear in their gut is either a liar or a fool. My first real taste of it came on a rice paddy dike. Our platoon was moving in a single file across this narrow strip of mud, exposed on all sides. I was humping my M16 and a law rocket. The sky was a brilliant, indifferent blue. 1 second, it was quiet. The next, the world exploded. The distinctive pop of a case erupted from a tree line a few hundred meters away. We all hit the deck, plunging into the filthy, knee-deep water of the paddy. Bullets hissed over my head, close enough to feel the air move. For a second, I just lay there, facing the mud, looking up at that perfect blue sky and thanking God I was still breathing. Then reality crashed back in. We were pinned down, completely exposed. The firefight was a blur of noise and confusion. We returned fire, trying to suppress them, but we were in a terrible position. When the shooting finally died down, we learned the cost. A young Marine, just a few guys ahead of me, had taken a round clean through the forehead. He was dead before he hit the water. I just stared, my mind numb. It could have been any of us. It could have been me. I've always known, deep down, that it's only by the grace of God that I'm here to tell this story today. May he and all the others rest in peace. There are days that burn themselves into your memory. They're not just recollections. They're open wounds that never quite heal. February 22nd is one of those days for me. It started as just another patrol. We moved through a patch of jungle, then came to a small stream. They called it a river, but it was maybe waist deep and 15 feet across. We crossed it and moved up behind a small hutch, a peasant's hut. The captain held up a hand, signaling for us to halt and take cover. Then he motioned to me. "Go check it out," he whispered. I did it by the book. Slipped inside, checked for false walls, false ceilings, anything out of place. It was clean. I came back out to report to the captain. And that's when I made my first mistake. The #1 rule in the field is to maintain spacing, 15 to 20 feet between men. But I didn't want to shout, so I moved right up next to him. I was telling him what I'd found when I glanced over my left shoulder. And I saw it. Something we couldn't see from our approach. A small homemade antenna attached to the front of the hutch. My second mistake was instinct. I pointed. In the field, you never point. You point at something, you might as well be pointing at your CO, telling the enemy, "Here's the guy in charge." The instant my finger went out, all hell broke loose. An AK opened up from inside the hutch. The first round zipped past my chest, so close it snapped a strap on my rucksack. An inch to the right, and it would have gone straight through my heart. Another round grazed the back of my neck. I've still got the scar. Then a burst of 3 more rounds slammed into my right shoulder, just above the collarbone. It felt like being hit with a sledgehammer. The force of it threw me backwards, maybe 15 feet, into the mud. At the exact same moment, the captain went down, a round in his chest. I was lying there, the world spinning, my shoulder on fire. On the far side of the hutch, I heard the thump boom of an M79 grenade launcher, which meant our flank was engaged too. My training kicked in. I had to get to cover. Around the hutch was a small drainage ditch, like a little moat. I started crawling towards it, careful as I could. Those ditches were often filled with punji sticks, sharpened bamboo stakes, hidden just under the water, waiting to cripple you. I slid into the relative safety of the ditch and screamed the first thing that came to mind. "Corpsman! Corpsman up!" Our doc came running, low crawling through the mud. He reached me and started tearing at my shirt to get to the wounds. "Leave me," I yelled, spitting out a mouthful of muddy water. "Get the captain. Get the skipper." He didn't hesitate. He scrambled over to the captain, who was lying completely exposed. Watching them out there, a perfect target for a second burst, I felt a surge of blind panic. I looked for our ammo bearer, a kid named Daryl. He was over by the tree line, guarding a prisoner we'd taken. "Daryl," I screamed. "I need you." He yelled back, "I got a prisoner." There was no time for debate, no time for morality. "Waste him. I need you now." There was a half-second of silence. Then Daryl was running towards me. I saw it in his eyes. The haunted, hollowed-out look of a boy who had just killed a man for the first time, up close and personal. He'd used his knife, a big, pirate-looking thing, and done exactly what they taught us in training. He reached the captain and started to drag him towards the corner of the hutch for cover. The second he laid hands on him, the AK opened up again. I watched in horror as a line of bullet impacts stitched across the ground, a foot apart, walking right towards them. Thwack thwack into the mud. Daryl grunted and was thrown backwards, almost into my lap. He'd taken 3 rounds in his right thigh. Adrenaline is a strange thing. I crawled out of the ditch, my own shoulder screaming, and used my good leg to hook his arm and drag him next to me. I didn't pull him into the ditch. He was bleeding too much, and I didn't want him drowning in that filth. I grabbed his first aid pouch, ripped it open, and pressed the bandage against the worst wound, the one that was pumping blood with every heartbeat. Then I used my own bandage for the other 2 holes. He was starting to go into shock, his eyes glazing over. I had to keep him with me, so I started singing. Just started belting out marching cadences, the stupid songs they teach you in boot camp, anything to keep him focused on my voice. Someone crawled up and yelled that all the medevac choppers were refueling. No dust-offs available. They were sending a gunship instead. A gunship doesn't land. It hovers, maybe 5 feet off the ground, a loud, angry hornet daring you to come to it. When I heard the W.O. pwop of its rotors getting closer, I got Daryl onto my good shoulder and stood up. It was maybe 40, 50 feet to the clearing where it would hover. I stumbled forward, my legs like jelly, his dead weight an impossible burden. Halfway there, my strength gave out. I had to stop and switch shoulders. As I did, my helmet and glasses fell off into the mud. I grabbed the helmet and jammed it back on my head, but left the glasses. No time. I just kept going. When I reached the gunship, the door gunner was leaning out, screaming at me to hurry. I didn't have the strength to lift Daryl gently. I just gathered what was left of my energy and heaved him up onto the floor of the chopper. Then I clawed my way up after him. They flew us to a small aid station in a town called Dian. They took me into a tent, and they prepped Daryl to be flown to a real hospital in Japan. He had shattered bone to deal with. That day was a crucible, but the war wasn't done with us. Not by a long shot. A month later, on March 19th, 1969, we were at Liberty Bridge. We had just come in from the bush, and for a Marine, the rear base was as close to heaven as you could get. Barbed wire, tanks, artillery, a perimeter that felt safe. And the chow hall. After weeks of sea rations, a hot meal felt like a miracle. A real toilet instead of a slit trench. It was the little things that kept you sane. The sanity didn't last. Around 2 in the morning, the NVA hit us. Not VC guerrillas, but a full-blown North Vietnamese army unit. They came in force. They used Bangalore torpedoes to blow holes in our wire, and for the first time, I saw them use flamethrowers. The bunker next to mine was engulfed in a torrent of liquid fire. The screams of the men inside. You don't forget a sound like that. They were burned alive. They were throwing thermite grenades down the barrels of our howitzers, melting them from the inside out. The fight raged for hours. Around 5 a.m., as the sky was starting to turn a sickly gray, me and another guy found our corpsman, Doc Hammond, in a shell crater. He'd been shot in the head. We grabbed him to pull him out. As we lifted him, something wet and heavy slid out from under his helmet and landed on my foot. I was barefoot, We often were in the bunkers to avoid jungle rot. It was his brain. His goddamn brain was on my foot. A few hours later, the attack had been beaten back. The sun was up. I was sitting on the ground, exhausted, starving. I pulled out one of those John Wayne chocolate bars from a key ration pack. We called them son of a bitch bars because they tasted like wax. But right then, it was the best thing I'd ever eaten. About 15 feet away from me was the body of an NVA soldier. A tank had run him over. There was nothing left but a pulpy, red mess. You could make out a thumb, but that was it. And there I sat, calmly eating my chocolate bar, looking at this thing. And the only thought in my head was, better you than me, pal. Better you than me. That's what war does. It scrapes away your humanity until there's nothing left but the raw animal instinct to survive. They patched me up at the aid station in Dian. My shoulder was a mess of torn muscle and shattered pride. While I was lying there, a chopper landed with a mail delivery. There was a letter for me from my mom. I tore it open. In her familiar handwriting, she told me that my cousin, Mike Gorman, had just arrived in country. His new Cobra gunship unit was based in Dian. I couldn't believe it. I got permission to leave the ward and went hobbling towards the airfield, yelling his name. Mike Gorman! A figure detached from a group of pilots and started running towards me. It was him, my cousin. We slammed into each other in a hug, right there on the tarmac, two kids from back home who'd found each other in the middle of hell. It was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I'd promised I'd come back to see him later, but first I had to get my glasses fixed. The ones I'd lost in the mud on February 22nd. That turned into its own absurd odyssey. I had to hitch a series of chopper rides, a daisy chain of flights, just to get to a bigger base in Saigon where they could issue me a new pair. By the time I got back to my unit a few days later, my sergeant was not pleased. "Where the hell have you been, Marine?" he growled. I was officially listed as a WO absent without leave. My punishment for getting wounded, losing my glasses, finding my cousin, and navigating the Army's logistical nightmare? They extended my tour in Vietnam by 4 days, 1 extra day for each day I was gone. Welcome to the Marine Corps. I collected other scars along the way. Shrapnel from a mortar in my left leg, another piece in my stomach, a concussion from a grenade that went off behind me. I even had another one of those surreal celebrity encounters. Got sent to a hospital in Da Nang, and who walks in but the actor Jimmy Stewart. He was an officer in the Air Force Reserve. He came over to my bed with that famous halting voice of his and said, "Son, well, where do you get hit?" It was like living in a fever dream. I came home with a couple of Purple Hearts. They're not badges of honor. Not to me. They're receipts. They're just physical proof that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time and paid for it with a piece of your body. The real honor belongs to the guys who paid with everything. For a long time after I got back, I felt a deep, gnawing shame. It's called survivor's guilt, I guess. Why me? Why did I get to come home, get married again, have kids, and live a life when guys like Dennis Michael, like Doc Hammond, like the kid on the rice paddy dike didn't? They were just as brave, just as scared, just as human as I was. It's a debt you can never repay. I look at those medals sometimes, tucked away in a drawer. I don't see glory. I see the faces of the fallen. I feel the weight of their absence. I was just one part of a team. A damn good team, but I was just a part of it. I got to walk away and collect accolades, and they got a flag-draped coffin. There's no justice in that. It took me years, decades even, to find any kind of peace with it all. To understand that the hate and the anger would eat me alive if I let them. I see so many vets, from my war and the ones that followed, who can't let it go. They carry that hell around with them until it breaks them. My message to them, to anyone who's been through the fire, is this. You have to let it go. Give it to God, Give it to the universe, whatever you believe in. Just lay the burden down. The past is a ghost. It can't hurt you unless you let it. I found my peace. Most days, anyway. I can look at that kid in the photograph now and see him not as a ghost, but as a boy who did what he had to do. A boy who went to war to avenge a friend, and came back a man who understood the true cost of it all. The glory isn't in the fighting or the medals or the stories. It's in the remembering. It's in making sure the ones who didn't come back are never forgotten. That's the only debt we can ever hope to repay.